got your coffee, you got a chair.
12:13.
Let's see. How many here have ever been lay delegates to annual conference? You ever been the lay delegate to annual conference?
Oh, here we go.
There we go. Something new. So some of you know kind of what it is. So we've been appointed for a quadrennium, which is Methodist for
4 years.
4 years. So this is our
Third of the 4th year.
third of the 4th year. Now there's 3 people talking today, and I'm the middle, which means I'm the least important of the 3, I think. But I would like us, I think we want to go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I think that we should go ahead and get started. And I'm having Scott just kind of flip through the pictures so you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like. I'm not going to speak directly to the pictures, but you can see, I don't know if you can see well enough to see that, these, this is Bishop Sandy, and that's our 2 DS district superintendents coming in, and our Bishop Sandy, who's serving communion, and here's where she's ordaining elders, and so there's a lot going on at the annual conference. And I'm going to start by just saying that the annual conference, in case you don't know, we call our region an annual conference, and this is the annual conference session, which is the meeting of the annual conference. And it's all the gathering of all the pastors and representative lay members of almost 300 United Methodist churches in Northern California. Northern California and Nevada. And we worship together, and we celebrate the retirements of pastors, honor pastors or spouses who have died in the past year, ordain or certify new pastors or those who have attained a new level of ministry. We appoint or reappoint active pastors to churches for the year, and do all the other business of the regional church. And notably, Pastor Owens was reappointed to Palo Alto First for the 2026-2027 church year. We met in the Sacramento Convention Center for 4 days at the end of June. The main room was set up with sufficient chairs for all the active and retired clergy, plus 1 or more lay members designated from each of the United Methodist churches. About 600 people were present. Each day we started with a devotional time for worship with hymn singing, scripture reading, and a sermon or homily. We heard many reports from the different agencies and committees. The big difference this year was that we're more comfortable now with our Bishop Sandy. She demonstrates a collaborative leadership through all of our business meetings and processes. We noticed that people coming to the mic on stage were not looking sideways to make sure that they were saying the right things. They weren't looking to the bishop. They were looking out and communicating with the congregation. So it was a more relaxed feeling than some years. We appreciated that this year the air conditioning in the conference room was set a little above frigid. I had to wear my sweater or jacket that I brought each day, but it was otherwise pretty comfortable. This year's theme was the 3rd in a 3-year cycle of our United Methodist Vision. Our theme was Healing the World. I want to give you some context and background, setting the stage, having to do with the general conference matters. We call our regional conference the annual conference, and the general conference is the international gathering of all of the United Methodist churches. Last year, Rick and I reported that there were 4 proposed changes to the United Methodist Constitution that were approved by General Conference in 2024. But a change to the Constitution requires that each annual conference in the international United Methodist Church has to vote on each change before it can become part of our church laws. So it took a year and a half for the international community to get through all the logistics, and they finally completed their voting, and all of the votes were counted. The Council of Bishops announced last November that all the proposed changes were approved by a 2/3 vote across all 127 of the United Methodist annual conferences around the world. So the 4 changes were: 1, worldwide regionalization. And this is particularly consequential to us in the United States because in the past, general conferences were always held in the United States, and at least some of the business of the General Conference focused on US-centric issues. But we don't want our US cultural or national context to either hinder or exacerbate tensions for United Methodists in other countries. We all want to be able to serve our own communities effectively. So this is what we voted on, is so that we can now have a region that is a United States region, just like other regional, actually central conferences in other places in the world have regions like this. Now the US has to create a regional conference, and that work is now underway, and the first regional conference for the United Methodists in the USA will be held as instructed by the new constitutional guidelines within 1 year of the next general conference, which is coming up in 2028. Okay, so I think it's going to be planned for May of 2029, which would be within that year period. The second change to the Constitution is gender and ability inclusion. So that includes male, female, and non-binary. Our third constitutional change has to do with racial justice, calling for the eradication of racism throughout our United Methodist churches. And the fourth is the educational requirements for clergy delegate elections. And this has to do with that regionalization again, because we want to have consistency and transparency while allowing those regional contextualization. So we don't have to require that a lay speaker has to have a master's degree when a master's degree isn't even offered in such a thing in a lot of places in the world, okay? One additional change linked to General Conference: usually clergy and lay delegates are elected by each annual conference to represent them to the General Conference, and ordinarily those elections happen the year before the General Conference. But our next General Conference is going to be in Minnesota. And our current political climate is such that people need more time than that to go through the process of getting a visa to come to the United States, if they're ever going to get one at all. And some people, even in the United States, are having trouble even on domestic flights because they may be immigrants. They could still be representing their United Methodist Church, but they're an immigrant. They may not want to be able to even get on a domestic flight to get to Minneapolis. So we've got a lot of work to do, but because some people are having trouble, would need more time to get through the process of getting visas, we are both checking to see if we can have an additional out-of-US site for the 2028 General Conference. But also we elected our delegates a year ahead of time in 2026 to give people more time to make some of those plans. And I know that Burke's going to talk more about that in his part of the talk. Okay, we accomplished business in our 4 days of meeting, and there were 22 recommendations, resolutions, and petitions that were presented. 6 of those are kind of standard, and we have to deal with all of them separately. They're things like budget, nominations, the closure of one church after the long process that they went through, 3 recommendations related to retired pastors' pension rates, housing exclusions, and pastors' minimum salary. Those are all things that we had to deal separately anyway. The rest are handled in legislative committees, and if they pass the legislative committees, then they can be put onto a consent calendar, and then the whole body can vote up or down on the consent calendar. So we had 16 that were eligible for review. If the legislative section voted at least 85% in favor, then the item moved forward to the consent calendar. All passed their legislative sections, but 2 were taken off the consent calendar by due process to be raised separately before the whole body. And when they were, they also passed. So 16 items were passed. And the recommendations, and I'm going to read kind of the titles of them just so you know some of the issues that we were dealing with. Training clergy in climate change and disaster response. Amending the standing rules regarding clergy utility allowance, which would be, relevant. Standing rules regarding conference committee on reconciliation. Restorative justice for stewardship of assets from Black congregations. Authorization to sell the Camp Lodestar property. Receive the report of the White Christian Nationalism Task Force. 3 different recommendations having to do with inclusive community survey project. The inclusion of deaconesses and home missioners as lay member to the California Annual Conference session for lay equalization. Resolutions to intentionally support the members of local churches that decide and go through the process of closure. Support gender inclusivity, equal protection, and sacred worth of transgender and non-binary people. Advance the work for reparation for African Americans. Urging fossil fuel divestment of all denominational funds at Westpac. Support the campaign to stop the killing of human rights activists in the Philippines. And support the relocation of the 2028 and 2029 annual conference sessions to Oakland for those years. Okay? So those are the things that we talked about in our legislative committees. I'm going to talk a little bit more about inspirational moments. Bishop Sandy's opening worship set the stage for our conference session. She spoke on the scripture Isaiah chapter 58. And these words of the prophet Isaiah are amazingly relevant today. We may claim to be a righteous nation, just like the people of Israel in those days. We want God on our side. And God responds, "Look, you serve your own interests on your fast day and oppress all your workers. You fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist." Then God tells us what he chooses instead for us to do. Loose the bonds of injustice. Undo the thongs of the yoke. Let the oppressed go free. Break every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry. Bring the homeless poor into your house. When you see the naked, cover them. Don't hide yourself from your own kin. That's what it means to be righteous, and we have God's promise. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like the noonday. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. And that's all in Isaiah 58. So Bishop Sandy exhorted us to become repairers of the breach and restorers of the streets we live in. We also heard inspirational stories from clergy who retired this year, including Mary Lee Sheffer, who was an associate pastor with our church years ago. We celebrated 30 years of the Order of Deacon, 70 years of the ordination of women. We welcomed the president of the Methodist Church of Fiji and Rotuma and celebrated 200 years of Methodism in Tonga. The Tongan community brought 200 singers to let us in on some of the celebrations with 4 anthems. We heard some little-known facts about John Wesley from our General Secretary of Archives and History, about his anti-slavery position and spiritual and financial support for a friend who was gay. We officially ratified the closure of a church near Sacramento after a century of ministry, and the opening of a new church that has formed from a group of Hmong speakers near Fresno. We sang together, prayed together, and found old and new friends to eat with us at different meals. And I'm going to turn it over to Rick, who has some words on numbers.
When will you entertain questions?
At the end of everybody.
I am going to do we are Methodist, right?
Yeah.
Methodist, we have Methodism. Including the methods is the gathering of statistics and the filling out of a form that we do and all churches do, except those who don't sometimes. And then that data is aggregated by a volunteer. He makes a report that goes in with all the conferences to the jurisdiction of the national. So I'm just going to talk about our California Nevada annual conference. There's a slide
At the
with
end.
numbers somewhere.
Oh, yeah? I didn't see
How do I get that?
I didn't see any numbers.
Yeah, I didn't see that either.
Okay, it's in the,
No, no numbers.
it's in a different set.
Well, never mind. That concludes my talk. Rick, numbers, data. Oh, okay. The first number is 299. 299.
That's cheap.
Bingo.
That number is the number of churches in our conference.
Mm-hmm.
It does change from year to year with additions and closures. So 299. Here's another number, 43,355.
Wow.
That is the average number of weekly worship attenders in our conference. So every church, every worship attendance, all averaged out. So the average number is 43,000. 355. We get specific. And 55. Yeah. Okay, so that is actually up about 2.25% compared to 2024.
Are those numbers right? 250, how many people in a church each Sunday?
The average total number
Right.
of worship
The entire
attenders
299 churches.
in all 299 churches, all added together on a Sunday, the average total number of Methodists participating in worship in the California Annual Nevada Conference is 43,000.
So about 150 people in church on Sunday.
Ish. Oh, well, I have follow-up data on that. Okay, now 4 numbers. 4 numbers. The numbers are 25, 45, 85, 85, and 150. 25, that is the number. 25 of the conference churches have average weekly worship attendance of 25 or less. So about 25 of our churches are that number below. Number 45, about 50% of our churches have more or less than 45. So that's the median number. So 45 is the median number. Half have more, half is less. 85, 25% of our churches have attendance greater than 85. And then 150, 10% of the conferences in the churches have attendance of 150 or greater. So it's very skewed. We have a lot of relatively small churches, and that is the tradition of Methodism. We have churches all over the place. And some of them, about 10%, have an average attendance of 150 or greater. Okay?
Can somebody back me up on the numbers? What's 43,000 divided by 2?
Let's move on. Thank you.
I'm with you, but,
I appreciate that, but
That's what, I'll have to talk to the statistician if that number's. All right, okay, 92. 92 is our reported 2025 average worship attendance. It's 92 for our specific
For our
church
church.
in 2025. And then, so conference tithing, that's attendance. Tithing, we changed the budget 12 years ago. They used to have math and calculations and all. And they changed it 12 years ago, and now it's 10%. The requested conference support is 10% of the budget, and there's some
10% of your income.
yes, it's
It's the
10%.
income.
10% of your income. There's allowed,
Chair.
are you talking about the
Over here?
enforcement?
Okay, sure.
It's the tithe now.
so call it the tithe.
I'm sorry.
There's an allowance in the calculation for certain expenses related to
Control
housing.
yourself.
Oh, there's a slide.
There it is.
And you're being recorded.
Okay, so that's 10%. Around 50% of our churches have a tithe of 9% or greater, about half and half. 35% paid at least 10% and some more. And why do they pay more? Because it is allowed. A lesson for each of us. It is allowed to donate more than 10%. And we gave, in 2025, we paid 100% of the requested contribution. And we've done that for many, many years. I don't even know, it's a long time that we've done that. And our conference contribution was $89,533. Now, I didn't talk about it, but this is the approximate number rounded for all the contributions by all the churches in our conference are all together, go together, and that's the approximate number for 2025. This number is recovered from the pandemic. It went down, but it is not quite at the level of before the pandemic. So that's basically my numbers. You want to do questions now? You want to do later? There was a lot, and I got a lot of people.
There's a lot of information that you both shared.
Yeah.
Why don't we do some questions, and I can close
Okay.
it?
We'll start with
Okay.
numbers. There's I got a lot of reaction about numbers in this group for some reason. Yeah.
Maybe some people might be thinking that's the total that comes in from our church. That's just what we give to the annual conference.
That is the number that we give to the annual conference for our requested contribution
Our tithe.
/ tithe.
Right.
Is it called an apportionment?
No.
No.
Well, I use that word because we've been Methodists for a long time, and if I don't use that word, people will say something. If I do use the word, they will say something. So I use both. Tithe,
It's sort of
apportionment.
like EOG tithe.
Yeah.
You know, some people feel very strongly it's only EOG, other people say tithe, it's the same idea.
What is EOG?
Estimates of giving.
Estimates of giving, yeah.
So, but the thing that changed with tithe versus apportionment was a more complicated system of figuring out how much to send to the conference. There were a lot of
Wasn't it
variables.
assigned, it was assigned by the district to the churches? The percentage
The
assigned?
apportionment was
Yes,
assigned by
the
the
apportionment
conference.
was assigned, but the tithe is just simpler overall, because it's 10% of funds, of any money coming into the church that is not designated for another purpose. So loose plate or EOGs, 10% of that, generally speaking, goes to the conference each month.
I just want to comment that the 89,533 does not, repeat, not include any of the special Sunday offerings, and does not include other special things that we do. So that is separate. So the 89,533 is just 10% of the amount of income we get, as Pastor Burke pointed out, but it also includes the facility use income.
Yeah.
It's the member giving plus the facility use income.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Other questions?
Thank you for, so at one point, you mentioned that the 4 constitutional.
Yes.
Got 2/3 of the vote. Was 2/3 the minimum required to pass them, or only 2/3 of the those
It was the
voting?
minimum required to pass.
And they simply got more than that?
Yes.
That's-
Way more.
The other was, could you say another sentence about the white nationalism? White
Yeah.
Christian nationalism?
Yeah, it was interesting because in a previous annual conference, we voted for a group to study and make a report of the evidence of white nationalism in the conference and in our areas, and then, lots of different, aspects to this. And the recommendation this year was to release the report. And in our legislative sections, we actually got to see a lot of the report that was, that they did. And they did just an astounding job of just very detailed, very factual related information about the evidence of white nationalism in our conferences and in our nation. So if I can, if I can find that for you for someplace, then I can give you what we saw in our.
Yeah, so that was my follow-up. Where can we get that report? Can you provide it to us?
I think that I can provide it to you. The part that I know about is easily accessed. I don't know if there's additional pieces that I haven't seen, but I can give you what I had access to.
For people interested in white nationalism in the United States, the Southern Poverty Law Center does great reports on that topic, and they actually really need your support right now during a difficult time.
Yeah. Okay, great questions. Any others? Okay, Bert.
Thank you
Oh,
both.
Carol.
Why on the regional, why did they choose to have it in the United States next year?
The question is, why did they choose Minneapolis or Minnesota for the 2028 conference?
In the US.
It's in the US,
Yeah.
and the reason is that we had to cancel the general conference of 2020 because of COVID. And that conference was supposed to be in Minneapolis. And a lot of the, the hotels, the site, the conference area, all of those things had already been paid for because everything was shut down in March before what would have been a May conference. So the conference would have lost multi-millions of dollars that Minneapolis said that they would then credit us if we had the next conference in Minneapolis. And so we are saving that money, and yes, there's some complaints, but it's kind of too late to try to make another arrangement, and we're already trying to figure out, okay, we're committing to make a conference for general conference in 2032, which is the following 4 years, outside of the US, but at this point, where would you like to have it, folks? Africa? Philippines?
Yes.
Philippines, yeah.
And have our journalists killed?
They won't be killed. Why wouldn't we go to the Philippines?
Because you have to have hired bodyguards.
No, you do not. I'm sorry.
No, because there are Methodist pastors who have not been allowed into the Philippines.
You've got, I worked with the Methodist Church in the Philippines, sir. Please, let's not talk like this about our sister churches.
No, it's not
Well,
about the
I'm
churches,
just-
it's about the federal government in the Philippines. Those
Right.
are very different things.
Please.
Yeah.
So I just think it's
Tom has a background at state. Please, let somebody else deal with that.
let's stay on the topic of.
Anyway, so I'm just recognizing that, yeah, we're anxious about having another general conference in the US, in Minneapolis. That's only 2 years away, but in 2 years away, we're still under the same administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? So there's a lot to be thought about, but we can't make a lot of changes on a dime. Yes?
I heard you say, I think it was an annual conference is coming to Oakland, or was it something?
Yes, it's been in Sacramento for a number of years.
Yeah, okay. I
And,
heard that.
And we were looking at moving it for 28 and 29 to Oakland. And one of the reasons is that the size of our conference is at a stage where Sacramento is unwilling to commit that far ahead to our small conference. They don't want, they might give us Memorial Day weekend, which we're not gonna do because we're gonna lose anybody who's in school if we're doing during school time. So there's just a lot of things also to consider, but there were different people who had your question also, but we decided to go ahead and pass that.
Right, because the conference, to some degree, gets smaller every year, the annual conference. So the number of people attending shrinks a little bit each year, just as the membership in the churches in general shrink a little bit each year. So finding the right spot that will provide the wherewithal we need to hold a 4-day conference that isn't extremely expensive is actually quite difficult to locate. So one reason to move from Sacramento is that because we don't get the services that we need there any longer unless we suddenly get 2 or 3 more people, which doesn't seem likely. And Oakland does provide the services that we need for the size of the conference we have. All right. Well, thank you both. That was great. There's really nothing more to say, but because I'm a pastor, I'll always find something to say. First of all, I would just tell you that, this is my 12th annual conference. Let's see, 13th annual conference that I've attended. And the last few, for me, this is 26, so from basically 2022, it's been rough going, for me personally. Because we had a different bishop at the time. There was a lot of political and power issues at work in the conference. And so it felt difficult to go to the conference and do good work because I felt not only disappointed and to some degree disengaged from the conference itself, but I also felt for myself and especially for others that I work with endangered by some of the issues that were going on in the conference. So last year, 2025, was a huge improvement. This year, though, I felt like I got a taste of what it was like when I first went to annual conference. And you all may recall that I wasn't raised in the church, this church or any other. So when I first went to annual conference and was in the praise team up front singing songs that most of which I didn't know, but by the end of 4 days you figure it out. I felt like I was at a revival camp, like those great summer camps coming by the riverside and singing and talking about your faith and how it's growing and changing you. And I had some of that experience again this year at annual conference. And it was such a relief because, at times the institution can take away some of the joy we feel in our own personal life of faith as well as within our local church. And I feel like that disconnect is not there the way it was, at least for me. And I'm feeling that for other folks too. I'm not sure, but I think Rick and Diane also had a very positive experience that was different from maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So that's a glorious thing. Another thing I'd say is when Ashley Bogan, who's from the archives, did her talk on, that was Friday afternoon. We do 2 sessions on Friday afternoon. We do a clergy session and we do a laity session. The laity session takes place in the main hall where the larger meetings take place. And the laity session I attended the first year, that's true, but I've not been there since. The clergy session is basically where we go over all of the things we need to vote upon, such as not legislative issues, but because we're Methodists, there's a lot of bureaucratic detail that we really enjoy. And so the bishops up front leading this and different people of different committees will come up to talk about who's on the list just entering the ordination process to become a provisional member, and someone else to become an associate member, not a member as in a member of the local church, but going toward ordination. And then others that are becoming licensed local pastors, and others that are actually going to be ordained hopefully in 2 days afterwards. But this is the final step that they be voted and approved upon by the clergy session. So I was the mentor of one person in particular who's been going through this process for many years, David Yang. And David's Korean. He went through the whole process of ordination, getting his seminary degree in Korea. But in order, for some reason it didn't quite connect over here, so he had to go through the school process again and the ordination process again. So to walk with him through that, even though it was deeply challenging for him, was so moving and inspiring to me, because we're from radically different cultures. But I saw what a big heart he has and how he wanted to be ordained and certified as a fully licensed elder within our conference. And so to walk the stage with him and to be there and bless him along with the bishop and so many others was a beautiful, once again, inspiring thing for me. But I was going to tell you about Ashley Bogan because she gave this lecture before the clergy and the laity sessions about John Wesley, and she called it his vitality. Now, in the 18th century, very different use of language. And so if something is vile, it doesn't mean it's necessarily truly horrific as we might think of vile. It's like if you're stepping out of the church and you're leading worship in a field where there are cows nearby or where there's a factory nearby, and you're doing it for the unwashed members of that community, the everyday people, not those that are dressed up for Sunday worship, who maybe own land, who maybe are important in the local community. That's what the Anglican Church was like at that time. And John Wesley and others, such as George Whitefield, felt it was important to speak to the real people that are out there, not just those who have paid, so to speak, for their salvation, but those who don't have the money to do that and wouldn't be accepted at the church, but they are more valuable in some ways even than the people that are already in the church. So she spoke about this and what a big step it was for John Wesley to go from being in the church, doing it the right way, the approved way, the sanctified way of the church hierarchy, and stepping out into the field and saying, "Come to me, all you who are laden and burdened, and I will give you rest." Well, that's pretty beautiful stuff, right? I mean, that's like at the heart of our Methodist system, that John and Charles did this beautiful work, and we continue to do it today. The General Conference is held every 4 years, as you've heard, and we are allowed to send 2 lay delegates and 2 clergy delegates. Now, interestingly enough, there's this whole process of nominations that takes place, and so all the nominations had to be in by 3 o'clock Friday afternoon. We did 1 or 2 rounds of voting after that, and then more on Saturday and more on Sunday before we finally had everyone together. The thing that I found interesting was it took so long to get the clergy delegates elected. But the lay people, we elected pretty fast. Says a lot about the difference between clergy and laity. I mean, they're all wonderful people, but sometimes the clergy have a little bit of they're more invested maybe in being at the General Conference, and the laity maybe not as much. So we have 2 clergy delegates, we have 2 laity delegates to General Conference in 2028. And then a couple months after General Conference, we have Western Jurisdictional Conference. And Western Jurisdictional Conference is our larger region that is made up of all the annual conferences within there. So Southern California, Northern California, Pacific Northwest, Rocky Mountains, Pacific Southwest, all of those are part of Western Jurisdiction Conference. Excuse me?
Alaska.
Yeah, Alaska
Pacific
is
Northwest.
part of the Pacific Northwest now, just as Hawaii is part of CalPAC. So in order to do that, we also need delegates appointed or elected, and so we have 8 clergy going to that jurisdictional conference and 8 laity. In addition, because we like to have lots of opportunities to vote, we have backups, reserves on all of those. We have reserves for General Conference and reserves for Western Jurisdictional Conference. So they had, at the very end, they had all the people that are either delegates or reserve delegates for both conferences up front. You could barely see the bishop. There were so many people up there. But it's lovely to do that because that's part of our system. And to Diane's point, we did vote earlier. Normally we would have done it next year, 27 for the 28. But because of the complications, it made more sense to do it this way now. We heard about the Order of Deacons' 30th anniversary of founding the Order of Deacons. And you know, the deacons are sometimes overlooked because it's like, well, what do they do exactly? Deacons in many ways are like clergy. They are ordained as clergy, but they're not appointed. They're not appointed the way I am and other clergy are appointed. They will look for their own positions, their own jobs. And they're often in the church, but oftentimes they're outside of the church, in academia, in social justice formats. And so there are not as many deacons as there are ordained elders, but still doing very, very good work. And I know I appreciate all my friends that are deacons because it's like they're not the non-church, but the outer format, the outer people who are doing the good work of our Methodist system independently of what happens during worship on Sunday. And that is so important. Let's see. So we did pass the budget this year, and as Diane said, we're looking at roughly 4.5 million. That is the money that comes in through the tithing. It's also money that comes in through different investments. So that's the rough amount that we're figuring the budget. For many years in building the budget for the annual conference, we would take, well, this is how much people are supposed to pay in their tithe. And this is how much they actually paid in their tithe, because as Rick alluded to, not every church pays 100% of their tithe. Some pay less, few pay more, but you've got to balance it out. And it was decided, while I was chair actually, that it's not wise to do it that way, because then you find yourself building a budget that's here, but you know the expected money is coming in is about here. So why do you want to have that distaff going on? So now we base the budget on what we think will be the actual monies coming in. Because the budget we're approving this year, June of 26, is for next year. And so we can't use all of the 26 data to base the 27 budget on, but you figure it as best you can. A little bit like what we do here, just on a larger scale. And let me see. Along with the wonderful worships and the time to spend together with friends and meeting new friends, clergy and laity, there's a new attitude in the conference. And part of it is the bishop, yes, but part of it is that we're changing systems. As you probably know, those of you that have been in the church for a while, we traditionally have a district superintendent who's the regional manager, so to speak, for our district. And as there are 5 districts, we have 5 district superintendents. As of July of this year, the decision was made that in some of those, not all of them, but in some of them 3, there'll be 2 district superintendents rather than 1. Now, that sounds in some ways needlessly complicated, but the reason is that the district superintendents have a lot to work with. 299 churches, it works out to anywhere from 40 to 60 plus churches per district. It's a lot of churches to keep a handle on. And most of the time, no surprise, the churches you're really addressing or dealing with are the ones that are in trouble. Right? Which church is having real deep challenges? That's where you go. If the church is doing okay, most of the time the DSs, we only hear about it from them once a year when we have our annual church conference. So in this way, each district superintendent, in our case we have 2, Theon Johnson, who's at Campbell, pastor there, and then Oliver Mangabut, who's at the Daly City UMC. So one is African American, one is Filipino. They are continuing in their roles as pastors at those churches half-time, and half-time they will be a district superintendent. So DS Oliver is our assigned DS for our church conference that'll happen in the fall. However, if for any reason he's not available, for example, he was assigned to this, he started it July 1st, July 12th, his father died in the Philippines. And of course he went back to take care of his family and be with that. He wasn't back here until I think almost the middle of August. So in that case, DS Theon was trying to fill in the gaps. So I think there's a lot of blessings to this, to have two. We're still working out the systems. There's only one other conference that I'm aware of that has this 2 DSs per district, and that's Pacific Northwest. Right now, there are, I think it's 4 of their districts have 2 DSs apiece. But they started at the same time we did, so we don't have any data to go on as to how well this works. But so far, I'm feeling positive about it. I asked Bishop Sandy about it. So the cabinet, which is all of the group of people, DSs and leaders within the conference, when they meet, there's a lot more people in the room than there were. But she sees that as a positive because they're looking for new and fresh ideas and attitudes to try and carry the church to the next place it needs to go. And as we know, between shrinking numbers of attendees, churches closing, the social issues that we're all facing, and at times the lack of faith that perhaps is more prevalent than it once was in the world at large. We need new voices and new ways to look at things to see what we can do to lift our church up and have it be successful in ways that might not have been imagined when Bishop Stewart built our wonderful sanctuary 60 plus years ago. But we need to find those. And so I think with this new system, I hope we'll have the tools and the voices to do that more successfully. That's all I have. Are there any questions? Peter?
You mentioned that the prospective representatives were kind of going to be elected amongst, was there electioneering going on before they tried to qualify for the position?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not like
know?
posters or people cheering and chanting, no, but it's more like if someone wanted to be elected as a representative, whether lay or clergy, they'd go talk to their friends and say, hey, I'm nominated, would you vote for me? That kind of, not anything strange, just normal, I think.
And there was a website that was on the annual conference session website that had a little blurb and a picture of
Bio.
different candidates. Yeah, a bio and a picture of different candidates. But only of those candidates who were with it enough to put it up there.
Right. I think by the time we came to the final votes, most of the people were up on that website, but I think the first day of conference, maybe three faces were on there,
but they were
and by the end they
10
were
or something.
18 or something.
I'm just worried at the local level right now, they're about to do the city council elections.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you just usually see somebody put a sign on the front lawn with a name, and
Right.
I'm a little worried that there won't be a way to figure out who to vote for. And so-
Yeah, Palo Alto Weekly has actually had an article on each person as they put in their name to be on the ballot.
Yeah,
So
I'm certainly not part of it.
Well, I'll bring in my issue, Peter, and I'll leave it on the table.
I don't want to.
Well, but if you're interested. But yeah, the word is out there. We don't have anything quite that well organized at the annual conference level. But since we only do this every 4 years, it's not a regular thing. Any other questions? Yes?
I heard you saying we all want to find ways to grow and improve the church. And one of those ways, in my experience, is to set concrete goals. And the Allens gave us some great numbers. And so they were talking about churches that have more than 85 people each Sunday.
Mhm.
What if we set a concrete goal as a community, we'd have to talk about it, of being one of those churches every Sunday? And what if having that goal helped us invite friends to come to church with us?
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna give a point of personal privilege. In case you hadn't heard before, our daughter Emily was hired this spring to be the interim secretary of General Conference. So she has been one of our lay delegates for General Conference for the last 3 General Conferences. So since 2016 or 2012 or something like that. But she felt because she was the secretary of General Conference that she could not be a delegate to General Conference for this coming cycle. But she's not the secretary for the jurisdictional conference, and she has all of this, knowledge in her head about how things are, and the voting in of bishops, and all of that kind of thing, that she put her name in as a potential delegate for jurisdictional conference. And even despite the fact that nobody's up there talking, nobody's, giving a rah-rah speech in front of the whole conference or anything, she got 85% of the vote for jurisdictional conference. And I just thought that was amazing. She was never even up in front of the conference this year. And this is the first year and years and years and years that she hasn't been up in front. She's not the agenda chair, she's not, all of these other things, but she wasn't even up in front, and she still got 85% of the lay delegates vote.
I think she's gonna be I think she's gonna go from interim to secretary for the general conference, so that's in the future. But I know our general conference is in good hands with Emily doing her work. Any other questions?
You were talking about people who wanted to be in ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that somebody that wants to, from our church or any church, they talk about it in the church.
Yeah, they do.
And
Local
then-
church first.
And then the church approves of them or not approve of them.
Right, it has to go through
a
SDRC.
annual conference.
Right, so if the pastor at a local church and the staff parish relations committee approve and vote to approve the candidacy of someone going toward ordination, that's the beginning step. And then they would then be assigned, that individual would then be assigned a mentor and would start to meet with the district ordination committee. So at this point, to my knowledge, there's no one in our church that's interested in moving toward ordination. But of course, if anyone here ever is.
We had ones in the past.
Yeah.
Which we did not approve.
Yeah, did not.
Did not approve, oh dear.
We
Oh,
also had some that we have.
okay, well, that's good to hear. Well, all right, thank you all very much. I'm glad you all came and heard, and thank you, Rick and Diane, for that fabulous job. Thank you for being here and for your faithfulness to this church. I will see you soon. Yes, thank you, Scott.